Hi, my name is Dolores, and tonight, at my own son's engagement party, I was seated near the kitchen, while strangers toasted his success, using words I once taught him. They called me a +1. They said I never finished anything, but I'm the one who built the very thing that saved his fiancée's grandmother from dying alone. They didn't know, because he never told them. So here's my question. What do you do when the person you raised starts erasing you? Would you stay silent? Or would you finally speak? I arrived alone. No one greeted me at the front of the venue, not even Reese. A young man in a black vest checked a clipboard, nodded without meeting my eyes, and gestured toward the dining hall. "You're at table 11, ma'am, parent of the groom." Parent of the groom, no name, just a role. I followed the hum of distant conversation, heels silent on polished marble. The restaurant was modern, glass, chrome, and the soft throb of piano jazz playing through ceiling speakers. A sea of white tablecloths, gold-rimmed plates, and centerpieces taller than most of the women in the room. I paused to scan the place, hoping, foolishly, for a familiar wave or a smile. None came. When I reached table 11, I realized quickly I was seated with strangers. A woman with a red dress too tight for comfort chatted with a man about stock options. Another couple discussed hiking in Utah. No one looked my way. No one asked my name. I pulled out the chair with the fewest crumbs around it and sat. The kitchen door was just behind me, swinging open every few seconds with the clang of plates and bursts of heat. A busboy brushed past me with a tray, muttering something under his breath. I sat straight, smiled politely, made a few attempts at conversation, polite nods and light questions. They didn't really land. I remembered suddenly the time Reese had brought home a certificate in 3rd grade. "I got the highest score, Mom," he'd said, eyes sparkling, "because you taught me to focus." He made me hang it on the fridge with 3 magnets, even though it curled at the edges. Now I didn't even merit a printed name on a card. Then came the speeches. Reese stood at the center of the room, holding a glass of wine, his fiancée Amanda beside him. His voice was warm, polished. "I've learned a lot about perseverance," he began, "about building something from nothing, about legacy." I smiled, despite myself. But then he shifted. "I've also learned what not to do. Growing up, I saw someone I loved start so many things, but never quite finish them. Ideas, projects, even people. And that showed me how dangerous it is to stop halfway. That's why I finish what I start." Laughter. People nodded. I stared at my plate. Steak, medium rare, carrots cut into perfect coins. My hands didn't move. My breath felt shallow. Across the table, Amanda glanced at me. Just a flicker of something in her eyes. Awareness? Guilt? I couldn't tell, but she noticed, unlike everyone else. I picked up my knife and fork, cut a piece of steak as if the motion might ground me. It didn't. I thought of the gold ring I sold to help Reese pay for his 2nd semester of grad school. Of the nights I stayed up proofreading his thesis, my eyes burning from screen glare. Of the early mornings I drove him to campus when his old car wouldn't start. I didn't finish things. I finished him. After the toast, as guests clapped and servers moved to refill glasses, I excused myself. The hallway to the restrooms was dim, cooler than the main room. As I turned the corner, I heard a voice from behind the kitchen doors. "Who's the +1 with Reese?" someone asked, laughing. My chest tightened. In the mirror, the light above flickered slightly, casting a sharp line across my face. I stared at the woman looking back at me. Older, yes. Lines deeper, eyes quieter, but not invisible. I pressed a hand to the sink edge, leaned in, and whispered, "I'm not just a +1. I built him. Maybe someone sees. But seeing and speaking are 2 very different kinds of courage." I returned to the table slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I reached my seat, the plate was gone, cleared without a thought, as if I'd never been there. The napkin I'd folded neatly was gone too. A small detail, but one that hit harder than I expected. I sat down without a sound, No one noticed. No one asked. The chatter around me buzzed on, a distant static I couldn't tune into. I looked at the faces at the table, middle-aged, well-dressed, vaguely familiar. One man wore a badge from an energy conference. A woman scrolled through her phone, barely looking up. I could have been anyone. I could have been no one. Even the caterers don't see me. Reese walked by, laughing with someone in a navy suit. I recognized him from the company's website. An investor, I think. They stood barely 3 feet from me. Reese never turned his head, never acknowledged me. I wasn't wearing a name tag. Maybe that was the problem. At the head table, Amanda leaned into her father, laughing at something he'd said. She touched his hand lightly, a gesture of affection that made something inside me ache. I wondered if she knew, if she suspected. Or had Reese given her the edited version, the one where I was a woman who'd wandered too far from the script? I reached for my water glass, took a small sip. As I set it down, Reese approached. He smiled, all teeth and timing. "Hey, Mom," he said softly, leaning in just enough so no one else could hear. "Let's not bring up elderroot tonight, okay? Amanda's folks are Ivy League. We don't want to confuse the narrative." Confuse the narrative. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I wasn't sure what to do with the weight of that sentence just yet. He patted my shoulder, like he was tucking something back into place, then walked off. Across the room, applause erupted for the arrival of dessert. Laughter rose like smoke. I picked up my knife, looked down at the roasted carrots on my new plate. They were perfectly arranged, glossy with butter. I sliced into one slowly, deliberately, as if the motion alone could make sense of things. Each cut was careful, precise, a ritual almost, a way to remember who I was before I became a prop in someone else's celebration. I thought back to those first few months building elderroot, late nights in my kitchen, writing code with a mug of tea that always went cold. The thrill when Mrs. Ellsworth, 79 and blind in one eye, managed her first video call. She'd cried. I'd cried too. That had been real. Now, I sat here, surrounded by strangers who thought I was someone's date, or worse, just a warm body filling a chair. Amanda looked my way again. Her smile faltered. Something shifted in her expression. Confusion, maybe. Or recognition. It wasn't clear, but it wasn't nothing. Maybe someone sees, because if I turned away now, I'd be giving them permission to forget me forever. I stepped away from the reception hall, its light and laughter dimming behind me. The air in the hallway felt cooler, still carrying the scent of roasted vegetables and perfume, but it was quieter, mercifully so. I walked slowly, letting my heels tap gently on the tile as I passed a line of framed photos on the wall. Most were of Reese and Amanda, engagement shots, vacation smiles, the kind of pictures carefully chosen to portray a legacy not yet earned. At the far end of the corridor, a door stood slightly ajar. A soft laugh floated out. Amanda's, unmistakable. I hesitated, drawn by instinct more than curiosity. Quietly, I moved closer and glanced inside. They were sitting on a velvet bench, Amanda and her grandmother, Margaret. Amanda held a tablet, its screen glowing. I heard her say, "Look what Reese made for you." She tapped to play a slideshow. Music played softly from the speakers. Photos faded in and out. Margaret's youth, holidays, family dinners. Every image was chosen with care, every caption worded tenderly. I stood still. I had spent 3 nights compiling that slideshow, scanning old photographs, some bent at the corners, choosing the background music, writing those captions, cropping out distractions. I had delivered it to Reese the week before, sealed in a folder, labeled with a post-it note for Amanda's grandmother. "Please give this to her with love." He had. As his own. I didn't step inside, didn't correct her, didn't need the apology that would never come. Instead, I turned back toward the main room. Just outside the entrance, 2 guests stood chatting. I paused by a water station to give them space. "That woman at the back table," one of them said casually. "Is she a friend of the family?" "I thought Reese's mom passed away a while back," the other replied. "He never really talks about her." My heart didn't stop. It clenched. Not in shock, but in something older, familiar. I didn't move, just stood, lips slightly parted, as if the air itself might catch the weight of what had been said. They thought I was dead. I walked slowly back to the hallway mirror and stared at myself. My blouse was perfectly pressed. My lipstick had faded, but my eyes were sharp. I was here, flesh and bone, memory and breath. Yet I'd been erased, not with malice, but with convenience. Inside the hall, a server walked by, balancing 2 glasses of white wine. He nodded politely, not recognizing me. I clenched my hands gently, then loosened them again. I remembered Reese in college, how he used to call me in the middle of the night when the panic attacks got bad. How I'd stay on the phone, breathing with him, one slow count at a time. I remembered driving hours to see him perform in his first academic conference, only to sit at the very back because my boss might be there. Back then, I thought I was helping him become more independent. Now, I realized I'd taught him to need me quietly and forget me publicly. That wouldn't happen again. I stood taller, shoulders back, chin level. If I didn't claim my place in the story, they'd write me out of it completely. Just as I stepped back toward the main room, Amanda passed by on her way to the restroom. She looked up, and our eyes locked. This time, I didn't look away. Sometimes, you have to acknowledge the storm before you decide to ride it. The lights dimmed slowly, replaced by a soft amber hue that cast long shadows along the ballroom floor. A hush fell as the cake was rolled in. 3 tiers, white fondant, fresh orchids, a little too pristine. Jazz hummed from the speakers, meant to set a relaxed tone, but I felt it only deepened the distance between me and the celebration. I stood just beyond the main crowd, half hidden behind a pillar near the back. Not because I was avoiding anyone. At that point, I didn't need to. I was already invisible. A waiter brushed past me, tray full of empty glasses. He didn't say a word, didn't glance. I might as well have been a lamp. Before I could reposition myself, Vera stumbled out of nowhere. Champagne glass in hand, heels too high for someone that jittery. I'd barely registered her presence when the liquid hit, an arc of deep red across my pale blouse. I gasped, instinctively pulling back, but it was too late. The stain spread, vivid as a wound. "Oh no!" Vera cried, loud and breathy. "Not the staff area!" Laughter rippled nearby. A few heads turned. Someone chuckled and said, "That'll leave a mark." I stood frozen, my hands clenched at my sides. The red wine soaked through the silk, cooling against my skin. Vera muttered a half apology before vanishing into the crowd. Staff area. That was the assumption. That I was one of the servers, maybe a manager keeping the chaos under control. Not the mother of the groom. Just another uniform, unnoticed, until something went wrong. I reached for a napkin on the dessert table, dabbing at the stain. Useless, of course. The damage was done. Reese appeared beside me not long after, his eyes glancing briefly at my blouse, but offering no concern. "Mom?" he said, as if starting a sentence he didn't want to finish. "Would you mind helping with the cake? We're about to do pictures, and they need someone to make sure the line moves." No apology, no comment on the wine, no acknowledgement of the moment I'd just endured. I nodded. Again. Because that was my job now. Agreed silence. While they posed, I stood beside the cake, smile fixed, posture neat. Amanda's family lined up, mother, father, cousins, each hugging Reese as the camera flashed. Amanda's mother even kissed him on the cheek. And me? I was holding the cake knife. People whispered directions to me as if I were catering. "Can we start cutting?" "Where are the plates?" I answered politely. Because that's what invisible women do. We make the party easier. I thought to myself, they only remember me when they need order. I imagined my face in the framed photos lining this venue, except I wasn't in any of them. Even candles flicker before they burn. And just like that, something inside me changed. My silence, once a shield, started to feel like surrender. I wasn't bitter. I was awake. From the corner of my eye, I saw Amanda watching, her head tilted. Not in pity, but in something more thoughtful. A question forming in her eyes, one she hadn't yet decided to ask. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I nodded. Dolores remained seated, watching the edge of a truth beginning to ripple. The music had shifted again, now a playful swing tune from the 50s, light and nostalgic. The kind of sound that once filled our kitchen on Saturday mornings, back when Reese was little and laughed easily. Now it floated over a crowd that no longer remembered how to see me. I eased into a seat near the edge of the lounge, where the overhead light had softened, and where no one expected anything of me. Around me, people laughed freely. A woman in a cobalt dress kicked off her heels and danced in bare feet, drink in hand. Someone whistled. A man clinked 2 glasses together behind the bar, performing a casual trick. The whole room swayed in celebration, but I sat still, hands clasped around a cloth napkin folded 3 times over in my lap, white and perfect in its effort to disappear. I didn't expect company. But then a woman, older, silver hair tucked in a loose twist, approached with a soft smile and a slight hesitation. "Excuse me," she said gently. "I hate to intrude, but did you ever teach at the Oakwood Library?" I blinked. I did. Her face lit up. "You taught my sister. She's still bragging about you. Said she hadn't felt that capable in years. FaceTimes me every Sunday now. Before Elderroot, she couldn't open an email without panicking." My heart shifted. "Margaret?" She nodded. "Margaret Whitmore. I'm Anna." I couldn't help the smile. "Your sister was one of my favorites. Sharp as a tack. Just needed a little nudge." Anna sat for a minute. We talked, not long. Just enough to remember what it felt like to be acknowledged for what you'd built, not what others had painted you out to be. Before she rejoined the party, she touched my shoulder lightly. "Thank you. You changed her life. Probably extended it." She walked away, and I stayed where I was. But something had quietly begun to shift. Amanda was moving through the room again, looking distracted, her expression tight with thought. As she passed the bar, her eye caught on a flower arrangement sitting slightly off-kilter. Something stuck out from beneath it, just a corner, folded and curled. She paused, tugged it free. It was a page torn from a newspaper, aged, crumpled, faintly coffee-stained. The headline was still visible: "Founder of Elderroot on empowering seniors across Texas." There was a photo, half of it gone, but the part that remained showed my smile, one eye, and the edge of the cardigan I wore every Tuesday at the library. She stared at it for a long time, then folded it slowly and slid it into her clutch. A minute later, she walked toward me. Her steps weren't rushed, but deliberate. I didn't move. I didn't adjust my posture or brace myself. Amanda stood beside me, silent for a beat. "Did you ever want them to know?" she asked, eyes not quite meeting mine. Without looking up, I said, "It's a strange thing, isn't it? Being forgotten on purpose." She nodded once, barely. "Yeah," she said quietly. "It is." She turned and walked away, but her steps slowed at the edge of the room. She didn't head straight back to Reese. Instead, she lingered by the side doors, phone in hand, unreadable. I stayed seated, heart steady now. Not triumphant, not vindicated, but anchored. Because even buried truths have a way of rising, especially when someone starts to dig. You built something worth honoring. I see it now. I hadn't planned on staying much longer. The lounge near the dance floor was thinning out, and the last round of champagne had already been poured. I shifted my shawl across my shoulders, more out of habit than comfort, and in doing so, my clutch slipped slightly off my lap. The small thud it made was muffled by the carpet, but something small, square, and black slid out and stopped just short of Amanda's foot. She bent down before I could react. "This yours?" she asked, holding up the USB drive between two fingers. Her voice was casual, but there was a flicker in her eyes I didn't miss. Curiosity, sharper than before. I didn't answer. I only nodded. She tilted her head, then took a step back and pulled a slim adapter from her purse. I watched her slide the USB into her phone. Her expression unreadable, her body quiet and still. The screen lit up. A woman's voice filled the quiet space between us, Amanda's grandmother. "It took me a while to learn, you know," she said in the video, her smile tremulous but proud. "But thanks to Elderroot, I saw my daughter every Sunday until the day I died. Thank you, Olivia. You made me feel human again." Amanda stared, unmoving. Then she looked at me. You're Olivia?" she asked, her voice caught somewhere between shock and reverence. I nodded again, just once. It started small. One-on-one lessons in a church basement, but it grew. Into something real. Amanda's throat worked as she tried to speak. "Why didn't you ever—" "It was easier," I said. "For everyone." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she turned. Reese had just stepped back into the lounge, laughing with one of his coworkers. Amanda crossed the room and said loudly, "Did you know your mother created Elderroot?" The lounge fell into silence. Reese froze. His glass hovered near his lips, untouched. "What?" Amanda raised her voice again. "The platform, the non-profit, the one your grandmother used before she passed. Your mother, Dolores, is the founder." Eyes turned. People stared at me, and this time, they didn't look away. I stood up, but I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Amanda had become the voice I never dared to raise. She turned back to the room, her voice steady now. We sat her near the kitchen, we made jokes, and the entire time, the reason my grandmother got to spend her last year with dignity and connection was standing right here. There were no more clinks of glasses, no more background chatter. Even the music, as if aware, had faded to a hush. I lifted my chin, but let Amanda speak. People began to murmur softly, names mentioned, faces recognized. The name Elderroot passed from mouth to mouth like a thread unraveling in real time. Then Amanda walked over to me, placed her hand gently on my arm, and said, just loud enough for the room to hear, "You built something worth honoring. I see it now." Dolores finally looks at Reese. Not with anger, but with knowing. The silence stretched longer than I expected. Amanda's hand was still gently resting on my arm when Reese finally cleared his throat, the sound brittle and misplaced in the stillness that had taken hold of the room. "Well," he began, with that practiced chuckle I'd heard in boardrooms and Zoom calls. "It was always a collaborative vision. I just had more time to scale it, that's all." A few guests nodded automatically, unsure what else to do. Others looked toward me, then back at him. Some stayed frozen in place, hands half raised with drinks that never reached their lips. Amanda's eyes narrowed. "Is that what you told your investors too?" Reese's jaw twitched. His eyes flicked around the room like a man searching for an exit that didn't exist. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. Plain, manila. The kind no one uses anymore unless they have something to hide. Or something to prove. I walked to the dessert table, now abandoned, and laid the folder down. With deliberate calm, I opened it and spread the contents gently on the white linen. One document, signed in blue ink. "This," I said quietly, "was drawn up during my second round of chemo. I was too tired to fight for board votes or business titles. I handed him stewardship. He kept the crown." Gasps weren't dramatic. They were soft. One woman placed her hand to her mouth. A man nearby whispered, "Oh!" Amanda stepped forward and picked up the document. Her voice steadier than I'd ever heard it. She began reading aloud. "Temporary transfer of executive function for Elderroot Inc., with full rights to revert to Dolores Monroe upon verified medical recovery." She paused. "Dated 4 years ago." Reese opened his mouth, then closed it again, His face betrayed every thought he'd tried to rehearse and every angle he couldn't find anymore. A hush fell over the crowd. This wasn't a room full of strangers anymore. It was a room full of witnesses. "I used elderroot after my stroke," said an older man at the back. "Didn't know this was the founder." Another murmured agreement. Someone else muttered, "Sat her by the kitchen, too." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Recognition passed through the room like an electrical current, quiet but unstoppable. Amanda set the document down in the center of the table, her fingers resting on the edge before stepping back. Not to give me space, to give the moment weight. I finally looked at Reese. And what I felt wasn't rage. It wasn't even grief anymore. It was clarity. Because some truths don't scream. They stand tall and wait to be seen. This one's not for show, it's for respect. The room had quieted into a sort of gentle murmur, that soft descent into endings when a party knows it's near its last breath. I stood by the table near the exit, where the party favors were laid out in neat rows. A few remained, candied almonds in organza bags, monogrammed keychains no one would use. I reached into my purse, hands steady, pulled out the white envelope I had sealed earlier that week. On the front, in looping blue ink, Amanda. Inside, a small handwritten note and a flash drive, labeled in black marker, Elderroot, Margaret's Wing. I placed the envelope beneath a low floral arrangement tucked beside the thank you sign. The moment was small, quiet, but it held weight. Some connections outlive betrayal. Amanda was helping the event staff gather glasses when she spotted it. I watched from across the room. She hesitated, bent to pick it up, saw her name. Her brows drew together as she turned it over in her hands. She opened it there, beside a folding chair. Unfolded the note first. "A gift for the place where your grandmother once smiled." I saw her expression change. The way her jaw tightened, not from anger, but emotion brimming. She slipped the flash drive into her coat pocket, pressed the note flat with her fingers, and walked quickly toward the doors. Outside, the air had turned crisp. I stayed inside. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed in my purse. I answered without looking. "You didn't have to do this," Amanda said. Her voice shook. "I know," I said. "That's why I did." She didn't respond at first. I heard the sound of her breath hitching, the rustle of leaves in the parking lot. Somewhere nearby, someone called for a ride. Amanda didn't hang up. I didn't either. When the silence settled enough to breathe, she finally said, "She would have loved this." "I know she already did," I replied. Inside, the room swayed back to its rhythm. Guests were trickling out now, hugging one another, calling farewells. The DJ had switched to a slow jazz tune, something older, familiar. The kind of melody that didn't demand dancing, only listening. An older woman approached me. She looked unsure at first, then spoke gently. "My daughter put me on elderroot after her divorce. Helped me stay connected to my grandkids. I didn't know it was you." I nodded, surprised at how warm the words felt. She took the seat beside me. "Thank you," she said. A minute later, someone else offered me a chair closer to the main table. I declined. This chair was just fine. Amanda returned not long after, coat draped over her arm. She didn't say much, just walked over, paused by the edge of the table, and set a single gardenia beside my clutch. "This one's not for show," she said. "It's for respect." And sometimes, the most profound applause comes without a single hand clapping. Healing isn't a headline, but it holds. Sunlight slid across the floorboards like a soft hush. I hadn't drawn the curtains. Let it come in. The orchid Amanda gave me sat near the window, petals just beginning to loosen their edges, like they were breathing too. My inbox had 43 unread emails. I opened them slowly, one by one. Messages from names I didn't recognize. Children of former elderroot users, local librarians, a man who said my tutorial taught his mother to order groceries again. One simply said, "You changed my father's last year of life. Thank you." I stared at that message longer than the rest. Not because it surprised me, but because it reminded me, what we build, if honest, keeps echoing long after we're done claiming credit for it. There was a podcast request from a social impact group. A university outreach coordinator asked to license the Elderroot framework for community colleges in remote areas. An old student from my first coding class asked if I'd consider mentoring her niece. Reese hadn't called, but Amanda had messaged late the night before. "Just spoke with the board. They'd like to credit you officially." I didn't respond. Not yet. Some things don't require thank you notes. Some things simply need to be corrected. That afternoon, Amanda knocked on my door with a small bouquet of wildflowers and 2 coffees. No dramatic speeches, no apologies rehearsed. We sat in the kitchen like 2 people who knew how to sit in silence. After a while, I looked at her. "You're not like him," I said plainly. Amanda turned the cup in her hands. "I don't want to be, but I do want to help fix what he broke." I nodded. That was enough. We didn't talk about what was next, but I had the sense that something already had begun. Later, I printed an old photo, the first Elderroot session. 7 seniors sitting around mismatched chairs, smiling awkwardly in front of a whiteboard. I framed it and placed it beside the orchid. I stared at it for a long time. "They'll tell you you failed," I murmured, "until they ask how you did it." That night, I didn't sleep early. Instead, I watched a documentary about digital loneliness in aging populations, then took notes for a possible new project. Just an outline, just in case. And before turning in, I walked to the window and looked out over the quiet cityscape. Lights blinked in the distance. A siren passed, soft and fading. "Healing isn't a headline," I whispered, "but it holds." And this time, the light wasn't from recognition. It was from within. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that sometimes the loudest legacy is the one built in silence. You don't have to shout to make a difference. You don't need the applause to know you mattered. The people who once overlooked you may never offer an apology, but that doesn't erase your truth. To anyone listening who's ever been written out of their own story, I hope you find the courage to write yourself back in. What do you think matters more? Being recognized, or knowing the impact you've made? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been in a room full of people and still felt invisible? Tell me your story. Let's make this a space where those who were once silenced can finally be heard. And if this story moved you, even just a little, drop a 1 in the comments, or let me know where you're watching from. If it didn't resonate, tell me why. I'm here for real conversations. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, ones that honor quiet strength and hidden triumphs, subscribe to the channel. There's so much more ahead, and I'd be honored to share it with you.